It was a beautiful day. Amidst the bustling streets of New York City, the lunchtime chatter filled the cafeteria of a magnificent office building. Zoe opened a bag of chips and extended it toward the girl sitting opposite her. "Looking at you could make anyone lose their heart, Jina," Zoe said teasingly. Jina Hayes smiled, reached out, and took a few chips. Faint worry lines were visible on her forehead. "I don't care about those things. Zoe, I just want to live a peaceful life, one without any drama." "Hey, what's the drama in that?" "You're going to get married eventually," Zoe said with a smile, placing the chips on the table and leaning forward. She had her feet propped up on the chair. "Your boss is a dashing guy, and he's head over heels for you. Why don't you just marry him?" Zoe's voice was soft but enthusiastic. Jina looked up. "He's a playboy who changes girls like he changes shoes." "Marry him? Do you think I'm crazy?" She sounded annoyed. Zoe sat up straight, looking at her. "All men are the same before marriage, and they stay the same after—" Jina cut her off. "It's a delusion that they'll change." "It's all nonsense. A leopard doesn't change its spots." She shook her head and went back to work. Zoe looked at her with regret. "Come on, give him a chance. Since he asked you out, he's changed. Have you seen him with any other girl since that day?" Zoe tried to reason with her. Jina closed her laptop and turned toward her. "Listen to me. I don't like that man at all. I'm only doing this job because I signed a contract. Otherwise, I would have thrown my resignation in his face a long time ago." Gina's features tightened. She was a simple girl from a modest background. But ever since Ethan Miller entered her life, everything had changed. She just wanted to work and support her aging parents. But then there was Ethan Miller, who had become obsessed with her the moment he saw her. "Why do you hate him so much?" Zoe couldn't help but ask. "Because he deserves it." Jina lowered her eyes to control her anger. She opened her laptop again and resumed working. Zoe quietly stood up. Lunchtime was over. The bag of chips remained unfinished on the table. The glass of the magnificent building gleamed in the bright sunlight. Inside his luxurious office, Ethan Miller sat with narrowed eyes, deep in thought. Since morning, he had been thinking about only one person, Jina Hayes, a girl working in his office whose mere glimpse had driven him mad. Where he used to consider girls merely a pastime, there was Jina Hayes, for whom he was ready to cross every limit. "Are you coming out of the room, or do I have to call Monica again?" Ethan was still lost in thought when the heavy door swung open, and his friend Ryan walked in, wearing his usual deep smile, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. Ethan just turned to look at him and took a deep breath. "Don't say that useless girl's name again," he said seriously, and sat down on the black leather sofa. "What is this lovesick state you've gotten yourself into? Man, you weren't like this," Ryan said with boredom, standing in front of him. Hands on his hips, he stared at Ethan. "What wasn't I like before?" Ethan replied with concern. Ryan shook his head and sat down next to him. "So boring and serious. It's been a week. You haven't come to the nightclub. The girls are dying asking about you." Ryan rested an arm on the back of the sofa and folded a leg. He picked up Ethan's phone lying in front of him. There were piles of emails and messages, but Ethan hadn't replied to anyone. "I won't go there anymore." He snatched the phone from Ryan's hand. Ryan made a sour face and looked at Ethan. "A girl who doesn't even like looking at you, you're going to give up everything for her?" Ryan looked at him with confusing expressions. Ethan pocketed his phone and stood up from the sofa. "She isn't just a girl. She is my obsession, Ethan Miller's obsession, and I will have her at any cost." There was intensity and a hint of anger in Ethan's voice. "When she isn't agreeing, how will you get her?" Ryan stood opposite him. Ethan smiled for the first time. His smile was lethal. Ethan Miller doesn't need anyone's permission to get what he wants. His eyes held a cold heat, and his tone carried a chilling whisper. "What are you going to do?" "Ethan?" Ryan looked at him in surprise. "I am going to claim her. Tonight," Ethan said as he dialed a number on his phone. His facial expressions were hardening, and hearing his plan, Ryan started sweating even in the air-conditioned room. "I'll drop you off, Jina," Zoe said to Jina in the parking lot as she unlocked her car. Jina was waiting for an Uber. "No, why would you go so far?" My Uber should be here any minute, Jina gently refused. Zoe closed her car door and walked up to her. You should be careful. After making an enemy out of someone like Ethan Miller, Zoe whispered confidentially. But Jina smiled and shook her head. People like him only make threats. They don't have the guts to actually do anything. Crazy girl, you don't know Ethan, he actually does it, Zoe tried to explain. What's the worst he can do? Shoot me? Fine, let him. I'm not afraid of him. Jina tried to deny the fear, but Zoe knew it wasn't just fear. It was Ethan. More dangerous than fear itself. He won't kill you. He could ruin your reputation. Why don't you understand, Jina? Zoe shouted helplessly. He dares to try that. Before that happens, I'll either take my own life or his. Gina's face turned red. Her fists clenched involuntarily. Just then, Ethan Miller was seen approaching from a distance. Surrounded by bodyguards as always. As soon as his eyes fell on Jina, he smiled and walked toward her. Hi, beautiful ladies. Do you need a ride? He said as he reached them. Hatred naturally appeared in Gina's eyes. No, sir, I have a car. Zoe forced a smile. Jina didn't even bother doing that. So, Miss Jina, how will you go? He addressed Jina. My Uber is coming, sir, she replied with her usual anger. That's not fair. My future wife will go in an Uber? Not possible. I will drop you off myself. Come on, come with me. He tried to grab Gina's hand. She stepped back 2 paces in anger. Don't you dare use the word wife for me again. Your wish will never come true. She was screaming at the top of her lungs. Ethan Miller started laughing. My wish will definitely come true. Jina Hayes, get this into your pretty little head. He was challenging her. There was arrogance in his eyes. Invincible arrogance. Jina would rather die than be yours. Gina's hands began to tremble. Before Ethan could say anything more, her Uber arrived. She walked past Ethan and got into the car without looking at him. Zoe was still standing there, worried. But Ethan was still smiling. A scorching, cold smile. Jina sat in the Uber. Her heart was racing. She looked outside. Traffic was normal on the road. She felt some relief, as if she had escaped Ethan Miller's terror. But this peace didn't last long. Excuse me. Which route is this? You were supposed to take the main road. Jina looked at the driver in surprise. The driver glanced into the rearview mirror for a moment. His smile was meaningful. Ma'am, you are on the main road. Sir said to take the shortcut. The driver's tone was unusually sharp and smart. This is not a shortcut. I know the roads. This is a deserted path. Stop the car. Gina's voice was firm despite her panic. She looked out the window. There were no cars or people on the road now. Only high walls surrounded them. You don't need to worry. We are going the right way, the driver replied and hit the gas. Gina's hands and feet went cold. She immediately realized something was wrong. She tried to open the car door, but it was locked from the inside. Stop the car. I'll call the police. She tried to take out her phone, but just then, the Uber slammed on the brakes and stopped. Right in the middle of the road in front of her stood a black limousine. The person stepping out of it was none other than Ethan Miller. He was accompanied by 2 tall bodyguards. A smile of victory played on Ethan's face. The driver immediately opened the Uber's door and stood outside respectfully. Ethan walked slowly to the Uber. Welcome, Jina Hayes. See, didn't I tell you my wish would come true? Gina's face was flushed with anger. Without thinking, she pushed the door open with full force and lunged at Ethan. Did you think you could take me from here? Get out of my way! She screamed loudly. She raised her hand to slap Ethan. But he caught her hand in midair with lightning speed. Still so much audacity! This attitude! He gripped Gina's arm tightly. Jina struggled and tried to jerk her hand free. Let go of me, I won't spare you! There was cold determination in Ethan's eyes. He took a small syringe hidden in his hand and pricked Gina's arm. Now, take a rest. You have a very long imprisonment ahead. Jina felt a sharp sting. Darkness began to cloud her vision. Her protest stopped right there. Her body began to go limp. Ethan caught her before she fell. Jina was completely unconscious. Take her! And yes, every trace of this drama must be erased. Ethan lifted Gina's lifeless body into his arms, smiled victoriously, gave orders to the bodyguards, and laid her on the back seat of the limousine. Ethan Miller had fulfilled his obsession. Jina felt a sharp, heavy pain in her head, as if something was piercing inside. She opened her eyes abruptly and immediately found herself in a strange place. She was lying on a large, comfortable bed covered with fine, soft sheets. The room was magnificent. Valuable art on the walls, a gleaming dressing table in the corner, and soft light coming through large, clean windows. Every corner of this room screamed millions in value. But her eyes weren't on these things. The scene from the night flashed in her mind like lightning. Ethan Miller, the Uber, the driver's smile, and the needle pricking her arm. Terrified, she jumped off the bed. "Where am I?" She rushed to the door in panic and turned the knob. The door was locked from the inside. She started banging on the door in terror. "Open up! Is anyone there? Let me out! Open this door!" She kept screaming, pounding the door with her weak hands. But outside there was dead silence. No answer came. The luxurious silence of the room frightened her even more. Tears welled up in her eyes. She remembered her elderly parents who must be terribly worried without her. "Dad! Mom!" She collapsed against the door, sat on the floor, and began to sob. Evening shadows were peeking through the windows. The darkness of the night began to deepen. When the sound of the lock clicking came, Jina immediately stood up, alert. A maid with a stoic face brought in a food tray. "Ma'am, your dinner." As she turned around to place the tray on the table, Jina saw her only chance of escape, a heavy glass vase on the dressing table. In the blink of an eye, Jina lunged with lightning speed. "Stay away from me!" She smashed the heavy vase onto the maid's head with full force. The maid let out a scream, and the tray crashed to the floor. The vase shattered. Jina yanked the bunch of keys hanging from the maid's waist, opened the door, and ran like a terrified deer. She passed through a long corridor and reached the main entrance of the mansion. She unlocked it and stepped out. The scene outside the mansion was bone-chilling. In front was a deserted dirt road and, in the distance, a dense forest. There was a half moon in the sky, in whose light the shadows of the trees looked like terrifying demons. Jina didn't even look back. She just kept running straight down the road. Her heart was creating a storm in her chest. "Run! Save yourself!" But she couldn't run for long. Noise erupted from the mansion. And within moments, the roar of cars began to pierce the silence of the forest. "She's going! Catch her!" Ethan's bodyguards were hunting her. Jina cast one last look and ran into the deep darkness of the woods. Now, it was a race in the woods between a girl and Ethan Miller's hunters. The dense forest spread across the mountains where the darkness of the night was deep and terrifying. Jina continued running with frantic and full force without looking back. All she could hear was the sound of her panting breath and the rustling of leaves. Suddenly, she heard the echo of a male voice nearby. She quickly ran and hid behind a tree with a massive trunk. She pressed her body tightly against the tree. "Find the girl, or Ethan Miller will tear us to pieces." A man's heavy voice came from very close by. Jina squeezed her eyes shut. Her heart was pounding so hard it felt like it would burst out of her chest. She gripped the tree trunk as if it were her last sanctuary. The sound of footsteps and the angry voices of the men slowly began to fade. When the voices became faint enough, and relative silence returned to the surroundings, Jina took a deep, trembling breath. She felt as if she had returned from the brink of hell. She thought she was safe and turned to step back. And as soon as she turned, right there, where no one was a moment ago, stood Ethan Miller. His black shirt and sharp features were clear even in the dark. He was silent like a shadow, but there was a cold glint in his eyes that pierced even the darkness of the woods. A gasp got stuck in Gina's throat. Terrified, she took a step back, but behind her was only the solid trunk of the tree. Ethan slowly wore a silent, mysterious smile on his lips. "It is impossible to escape me, Jina." The voice was so low that even the wind could barely hear it. But it held undefeated arrogance. He slowly reached out and gripped Gina's wrist tightly. A wave of fear ran through Gina's body. A faint scream escaped her mouth, but no sound came out. She struggled to free her wrist, but Ethan's grip was hard as steel. She faced the reality of Ethan. She was once again in the clutches of this tyrant. It was unbearable for her. Her brain stopped working instantly. All hatred, all courage vanished in a moment. Jina's eyes rolled back, and overwhelmed by fear, she fainted and collapsed into Ethan's arms. Ethan caught her easily. The expression of triumph on his face deepened. He had won a war. "Rest, Jina. I really liked this little rebellion of yours." It took Jina a long time to regain her senses. Her head was still heavy, and blurry lines danced before her eyes. As soon as she opened them, she sensed intense darkness around her. This wasn't the comfortable, luxurious room where she was locked before. It was a small cell where light barely entered. She tried to get up in a panic, but immediately realized she couldn't move. Her entire body, wrists and ankles, were tightly bound with thick ropes to a wooden chair. The tightness of the ropes was digging into her flesh. "Where am I?" she muttered in a terrified tone. Her voice echoed in the dark, narrow room and came back to her. Her eyes tried to see something in the darkness, but it was difficult. At that moment, she heard the sound of someone sobbing near her, a faint but familiar voice. Jina's heart leapt to her throat. She jerked her head to the right with full force. "Who's there?" she asked in panic. Her eyes tried to adjust to the darkness. When her eyes finally adjusted, her breath stopped inside her. Right in front of her were 2 more chairs, and sitting on those chairs, bound in ropes just like her, trembling with fear, were none other than her elderly parents. "Dad! Mom!" Jina's eyes were about to pop out. Her voice was so intense that her own hearing went numb. "How did this happen? How did these people get here?" She frantically tried to break free from the chair, causing it to wobble and crash to the floor with full force. Her mother, Nancy Hayes, had her head bowed, tears streaming down her face. Her father, John Hayes, lifted his head shakily. "Jin, my daughter." John Hayes's voice was frail and trembling with fear. We were brought here by Ethan Miller's men. Last night he came to the house and at gunpoint." John Hayes couldn't speak further. His voice choked. Nancy Hayes said in a low, weeping voice, "He was waiting for you. He wanted to do this in front of you." Jina's blood boiled, but fear and helplessness overwhelmed her entire being. "No, how dare he? I won't leave him alive," she screamed, her face wet with tears, but her eyes held intense hatred. At that moment, the outer door of the cell swung open with a loud bang. An outside light flooded the room, casting the long shadow of a medium-height man dressed in black onto the floor. A cold draft entered with the opening of the door, and Ethan Miller walked in. A calm and cruel smile of victory adorned his face. Looking even more horrific in the dark room, he walked in with his head held high in a triumphant manner and stopped right in front of Jina. "Ethan Miller!" Jina said his name like a curse. "Don't you have any shame? You didn't have the guts to face me, so you brought my old parents. What kind of human are you?" Ethan listened to Jina patiently. He looked closely at her face, her beautiful features distorted by anger and helplessness. "Anger enhances your beauty, Jina," Ethan said in a cold, calm voice, as if sitting in a hotel. "And you asked what kind of human I am? I am the kind who can cross any limit to get what he desires. You can see the proof." He took a step toward Jina's parents, whose faces were stricken with terror. "Look at these poor souls, so old and weak. Don't you think they need rest now? Warning you, stay away from my parents." Jina screamed, "Don't even look at them! I will hand you over to the police. Untie me. You will go to jail. You will be punished." She was thrashing, trying to free herself. Ethan Miller laughed loudly. Jina's threats amused him. Then he stopped and said, "Jail, Jina! Right now you are in my personal jail. My laws run here. The police, they can't even knock on my door." "And punishment?" He suddenly became serious and looked directly into Jina's eyes. His eyes held a coldness like ice. "The punishment is for you, not for me, the man who loves you intensely." He leaned in and whispered near Jina's ear, "Enough with your rebellion. Now listen to me. He stood up straight. He took out a small shiny object from his pocket and spun it in the air. It was a black pistol. "You have two paths, Jina Hayes." He aimed the pistol straight at John Hayes's temple. "Path number 1. You marry me immediately. Right here, right now. I have brought the officiant and your parents will go home comfortably, respectable and safe." John Hayes's face turned pale. Gina's eyes widened in horror. "And path number 2? Gina's lips were trembling. Ethan took a long breath and looked at her. "Path number 2 is that you refuse the marriage, and then I will execute your father right before your eyes. Then your mother," he pointed at Nancy Hayes, "and then I will lock you back in this same place where your entire body will burn in the torment of your parents' blood. Think about it. This is not just a threat." No, Ethan. For God's sake, don't do this." Jina started screaming like a madwoman. She wasn't scared before, but she was now. "Let them go. They are innocent," John Hayes said in a weak voice. "Daughter, refuse. Don't marry him. We are not afraid of death." "Silence!" Ethan roared. His voice was so intense that all three flinched. "So what is the decision, Jina? Your stubbornness or your parents' lives?" Ethan looked into Gina's eyes. The barrel of the pistol was fully pressed against John Hayes's temple. Gina's mind was paralyzed. In front of her parents' lives, all her hatred, self-respect, and principles shattered in an instant. I am ready." The voice barely escaped Gina's throat. "I will marry you, but release my parents immediately." A cold, satisfied smile appeared on Ethan Miller's face. He lowered the pistol, but kept holding it. "A wise decision, Jina." He turned and signaled a bodyguard standing in the corner. Moments later, a scared, weak-looking officiant and 2 witnesses entered. The officiant fearfully started the wedding vows. In a state of hatred, fear, helplessness, and intense grief, Jina looked at her elderly parents and gave her consent to become Ethan Miller's wife. The "I do" that left her tongue felt like a heavy blow to her own heart all 3 times. When the marriage was complete, Ethan wore a deep, mysterious smile on his lips. "Congratulations, Mrs. Ethan Miller," he said, looking at Jina. His voice held a strange possessiveness. He signaled the bodyguard. "Untie their hands and get them home safely. And remember, not a single word should get out." When the sound of ropes untying came, Gina's body went numb. She didn't even try to say goodbye to her parents. She just watched them leave the room with vacant eyes. Only Jina and Ethan Miller remained in the cell. He came close to Jina, whose body was still bound by ropes. There was nothing in her eyes but intense hatred. Ethan leaned down and cut Gina's ropes. "Now you are my wife, Jina. You shouldn't stay in a cell like this," Ethan said in a soft voice. As soon as she was free from the ropes, Jina pushed him hard and moved away from the chair. Her eyes were spitting fire. "Get away from me! I am in your captivity, not your wife. You are a despicable, ignorant, and filthy human being. You think by scaring and threatening me into signing a piece of paper, you'll gain rights over me? That will never happen. Understood?" Ethan listened to her words calmly, as if she were praising him. He wrapped one arm around Gina's waist and lifted her face with the other hand. "This hatred of yours, this anger, Jina, I cherish it just as much as I cherish you." There was a deep whisper in Ethan's voice. He picked Jina up and carried her straight to the room. Closing the door, he set her down, but did not set her free. "If you hate me, keep hating me. It makes no difference to me, because I am not a captive of your character or your soul. I am only a captive of your beauty. And what I desire becomes mine. Now you are solely my property." He leaned over Gina's face and touched his forehead to hers. "Every moment of your life is now under my control." Jina tried to free herself, but she was helpless against Ethan's strong grip. Tears began to flow from Gina's eyes. These were tears of helplessness and defeat. She felt as if her existence had been reduced to a lifeless doll in the hands of this tyrant. That night, Ethan used his cruel power to the fullest. Gina's screams were lost in the luxurious silence of the room, but Ethan felt no pity. Weeks turned into months, and for Jina, Ethan Miller's luxurious mansion turned into a golden cage where the bars shone. But the bird inside suffocated. It was unending torment, a cycle where every morning brought a new form of agony, and every night ended drowning in the darkness of physical abuse. Ethan Miller, like an expert hunter, knew the art of breaking Jina's soul. There was a ruthless consistency in his torture. He knew that wounds on the soul run deeper than wounds on the body. His goal was not just to cause Jina pain, but to erase her ego, her identity. One afternoon, a glimmer of old resistance returned to Jina's eyes. Perhaps she didn't bow her head immediately to one of Ethan's orders. This slight insolence was unbearable for Ethan. He grabbed Jina by the arm and dragged her into the bathroom. His face was devoid of expression like a statue, but a cold fire burned in his eyes. "I don't like this stubbornness in your eyes, Jina," he said. Turning on the cold water shower, when the sharp stream of water fell on her clothed body, a scream escaped her involuntarily. She should have been numb by now. Jina was shivering on the cold marble. Every drop of water pierced her body like a needle. The cold was seeping into her bones. Her body started turning blue and her teeth chattered. She looked at Ethan with pleading eyes. "For God's sake! Stop! I'll die." Ethan stood leaning against the door, arms crossed, watching her with victorious eyes. "Dying isn't that easy, Jina. I will kill you a little bit every day. I will claw at your soul until nothing of you remains in it." Days changed, but the colour of the torment did not. Sometimes over a minor mistake, like a cup of coffee being slightly cold, he would grab her hand and take it near the burning burner. "This iron will burn your stubbornness to ashes." He would whisper in her ear, his hot breath felt on her skin. He didn't burn her with the burner, but the intense fear of getting burned and the sensation of heat scorched her soul. She would squeeze her eyes shut, and a voiceless scream would die in her throat. Those nights were deeper than hell itself. The master of the day would turn into a savage beast at night. When he would descend upon her, the walls of that magnificent room would stop Jina's helpless screams from reaching the outside world. The agonizing silence that filled the room after he left was more terrifying than Jina's own sobs. She would stare at the ceiling for hours, mourning her shattered existence and trampled dignity. This continuous physical and mental torture started taking its toll. The building of Jina's self-respect collapsed. She avoided looking at herself in the mirror. Whenever she caught a glimpse, a stranger, a frightened, lackluster girl stared back, in whose eyes the darkness of fear and helplessness had replaced dreams. "This isn't me." Looking at her wounded self, she sobbed. "My soul died long ago. This is just a shell that Ethan Miller has kept alive to stamp with his ownership." She began to feel intense hatred and disgust for herself. Every passing day left a new and deeper wound on her soul. She wasn't even alive anymore. She was just Ethan Miller's property, a lifeless doll whose strings were completely in the hands of her cruel and ruthless master. But no, she was alive, and life meant effort, the effort that every human makes for survival. Jina had to make that one attempt again, whatever the outcome. That night, when Ethan was out of town for a business party, Jina decided to make a final attempt to escape this prison. She got up in the deep darkness of the night and took out a small razor blade she had hidden in the drawer, which she had managed to save somehow. Going into the bathroom, with trembling hands, she extended her left hand. She placed the blade on a vein in her wrist. She couldn't do anything else, but she could die. Yes, death was the means of salvation from this captivity. Everything in her eyes was lifeless. It was as if life had been extinguished. She hesitated for a moment before cutting her wrist, but the next moment she slid the blade across her wrist, with full intensity. A stream of warm blood began to flow onto the white bathroom floor. Jina's body went limp. She collapsed right there on the floor. Her eyes were staring at the ceiling, perhaps where she saw peace and freedom. But it was her fortune or misfortune that Ethan Miller's personal doctor came every morning for her checkup. The next morning, when the doctor saw the scene in the bathroom, he immediately informed Ethan Miller. Ethan was horrified by the news. He had never thought Jina would go to this extent. By the time he arrived, Jina had been admitted to the hospital. Jina was given immediate aid at the hospital, and unfortunately, her life was saved. She stayed in the hospital for 2 days, and during this time, Ethan did not leave her alone for a single moment. A strange fear and pain had born in his heart, but a different plan was running through Gina's mind. She remembered that before the marriage, she had deposited some savings and the jewelry Ethan gave her into a bank. She knew the bank account number. Everything was updated via her phone. She asked the bodyguard for her phone. Immediately, she transferred all the money into her pre-marriage account. She could withdraw the jewelry later. Now she just needed a chance to run, which she got the very next night. The next night, when there was a slight lapse in security and Ethan's presence, Jina demonstrated amazing courage. She secretly wore a white sheet lying on the bed over her hospital gown, hiding her face. She kept the phone with her and slipped out of the room. Instead of going to the main entrance, she took the route to the back stairs. Exiting from the back of the building, she ran toward the main road. Yes, but before leaving, she didn't forget to pull the fire alarm. In the chaos, she found the time to get away from the hospital. Her plan was clear: escape Ethan's captivity and go to a faraway town where Ethan Miller's name and power couldn't reach. She knew the danger was immense. But she needed freedom at any cost. She went to an old bus station. Buying a ticket, she bought herself a simple coat. Now she was completely covered. She took the SIM card out of her phone and threw it away. She remained completely alert until she boarded the bus. And as soon as the bus crossed the New York limits, a new era of her life began. When the news of Gina's escape from the hospital reached Ethan Miller, his reaction was as if the foundations of his royal palace had shaken. When the stampede in the whole hospital ended, he sent the guard to Gina's room. He himself was helping the doctor control the situation. "Sir, ma'am isn't in the room. She isn't anywhere in the hospital. It seems she ran away," the guard informed him fearfully. He, who was already worried, lost all colour from his face. He immediately lunged at the guard. "What do you mean she ran away?" Ethan's voice boomed, and his eyes spat fire. The bodyguard standing in front began to tremble. "Sir, she escaped somewhere in the stampede." "We didn't realise." Ethan picked up a valuable crystal vase lying on the doctor's desk and smashed it against the wall. The sound of shattering glass and his intense anger spread terror in the room. "I spent millions on you people, and you couldn't control a weak girl?" he screamed, his facial features distorted in rage. "Find her! Look everywhere! Whatever corner of the world she is in right now, she is my property. She is breathing on this earth without my knowledge. Bring her before me immediately," he was roaring. The guards ran to search for Gina the next moment. He himself froze like a cold statue. The fact that Gina ran away was like poison to him. But this poison was filling his body with fire. She was truly gone. The next several months were a state of madness for Ethan Miller. He spent all his wealth, influence, and resources on finding Gina. His bodyguards roamed from city to city, state to state, but the earth had swallowed Gina, or the sky had eaten her. He found no trace of Gina anywhere. Gina's parents had also left the city, and now Ethan had nothing left but regret. "Where are you, Gina?" he would mutter every night in the silence of his luxurious room. His arrogance had taken a severe blow. When all doors of the search closed, and after 6 months nothing was known of Gina, Ethan's anger slowly turned into desolation and emptiness. And those nights he spent asserting his rights over Gina now seemed lonely and terrifying to him. One day, he was sitting in his office when suddenly his gaze fell on an old photo frame lying on the table, in which he had forcibly made Gina take a picture with him at an event. In that picture, hatred was clearly visible in Gina's eyes. "What have I done?" A cold sigh escaped his mouth. For the first time, he remembered all the cruelty and horror he had inflicted on Gina. Her beautiful face, her innocent eyes, her voice full of hatred. "Was I only a captive of her body? No!" His heart denied it intensely. At that moment, a severe sense of remorse attacked Ethan Miller. He felt that he loved Gina to the point of madness, but he had presented this love in the form of power and exploitation. He got up from the chair, and for the first time, tears came to his eyes for his evil deeds. "Oh God, what cruelty have I committed? I destroyed that innocent girl's life." From that day on, Ethan Miller's life changed completely. He quit all his corrupt businesses and debauchery. Instead of nightclubs and useless parties, he worked for charity foundations. He started helping the poor and orphans to atone for his deeds. His morning began with prayer and pleading before God. He had now become a noble, good, and remorseful human being. Gina's memories were a torment for him, but also a motivation. He knew he didn't deserve her, but only Gina's forgiveness could give peace to his soul. "Gina, wherever you are, be happy, be free." He would pray, but in some corner of his heart, he was still searching. 5 years passed. Ethan Miller had completely changed. He had built his entire reputation as the head of a great welfare organization. Today, he was in Aspen for a seminar, a mountainous region known for its beauty and cold weather. It was afternoon. Ethan Miller was waiting for his next meeting in the lobby of a magnificent hotel. He stood by the window, looking at the snow-capped mountains outside. His mind, as always, was lost in memories of Gina. Suddenly, his gaze fell on the other corner of the lobby, where a woman sat on a chair feeding juice to a small child with her own hands. The woman wore a simple but elegant shawl. Her face was quiet and calm. Ethan's heart beat with a sharp jolt. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. All his memories, his 5 years of patience, shattered in a moment. It was Gina. She had gained a little weight. Her face didn't hold the bitterness from before, but a soft serenity. She sat there, and a beautiful 4-year-old child was drinking juice and saying something to her. Ethan immediately gripped the back of his chair. His hands were trembling. "This is impossible!" A suppressed voice escaped his mouth. Gina leaned toward her child, kissed his forehead, and laughed. Ethan heard this laugh after 5 years. He took a few steps toward her, close enough to hear their conversation. Ethan was behind a pillar. They couldn't see him. The child pointed at his mother with a finger. "Mommy, will we listen to that fairy tale today too?" The child's innocent eyes and voice were audible. Gina was smiling softly. "We definitely will, honey. But finish this juice first." Gina's voice was the same, but full of softness and motherly love. When Ethan heard the word honey, his heart trembled. Was this child Gina's? The child finished the juice and hugged Gina. "Why didn't you tell Daddy we are here? You say Daddy is very good." Ethan's breath stopped. He had turned into stone where he stood. Gina hugged the child. There was a sad glint in her eyes. "Honey, you are still little. Your daddy has some important work he is doing. When the time comes, we will definitely tell him. Now come into my lap. I will tell you a story." A 5-year-old secret was unraveling before Ethan Miller. Gina, who hated him, had she become the mother of his child? Or had she married someone else? In the hotel lobby, Ethan Miller's world stopped once again. It felt like thousands of tons of weight had been placed on his feet. Gina and a 4-year-old child with her. How could he find out who that child was? He left the lobby and came out into the open air. His mind was racing. Ethan Miller immediately called his best friend Ryan. "Ryan, get to Aspen, now!" He spoke as soon as the call was picked up. The voice held the same old unwavering intensity. "Ethan!" "What happened? Are you okay?" Ryan's worried voice was heard. "I found Gina. She is in Aspen. I am sending you the details of this hotel. Find me every little detail about her and the child living with her. What she does, where she lives, tell me everything." "Okay, I'll check. You stay calm," Ryan reassured him. But Ethan's restlessness increased with every passing moment. Hours later, Ryan reached Aspen and explained the whole picture to Ethan. Gina came straight here after escaping from the hospital. She sold her jewelry and bought a small house here. Later, she started a job at a private school here. Her parents are also here. They live with her. "And that child?" Ethan asked, cutting him off mid-sentence due to an unknown fear. "That child is yours, Ethan. Gina hasn't remarried." Ryan smiled for the first time, and a calm descended on Ethan's face. Ethan closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He is my child, he said as if to himself. The child with Jina was his child. For the first time in 5 years, he cried out of happiness. Give me the address. Ryan! He spoke the very next moment. And no security, no bodyguards. I will go alone. This is a matter between me and my wife. She is angry, but I will win her over. He got up with a new zeal. Ryan, sitting in the chair opposite, was smiling. The next day in the evening, Ethan Miller stood at the door of Gina's house in a small neighborhood, dressed in simple clothes. His heart was nervous. This was the same Ethan Miller who settled huge global deals worth millions. But here, his feet were stumbling. Ethan knocked lightly on the door. Footsteps were heard from inside. Then someone came near the door, and suddenly the door opened. 5 years dissolved in 5 moments. The one opening the door was Jina, holding her son in her arms, who looked like Ethan's own reflection. Ethan Miller, you! Gina's voice got stuck in her throat in an instant, when her gaze fell on Ethan Miller standing in front. The terror and old fear resurfaced in her eyes. She started moving the child inside in panic. Jina, listen to me. Go away. What are you doing here? How dare you come here? She was holding her son with one hand. With the other hand, she started pushing Ethan. Get lost! If you ever turn towards my house again, or try to come near me, I will start screaming and tell people who you are. A cruel, despicable human. She couldn't accept him at any cost. Jina, I swear to God, I'm not that man anymore. I have burned in the fire of regret for 5 years. Listen to me just once. Ethan pleaded for the first time. I don't want to hear anything. You think by destroying my life, imprisoning me, taking your savage rights from my body, you can come here, apologize, and everything will be fine. I will never forgive you. Never! She began to pant from the intensity of her anger. She pushed Ethan the next moment, went inside, and slammed the door shut. Ethan Miller stood outside, defeated, leaning against the wall. He knew Gina's anger was justified. For the next several days, Ethan Miller came to Gina's door every day in the same way. He would stand outside. He just wanted one look. But Jina wouldn't even open the door from the inside. She had even stopped going to school. One evening, Gina's parents were home, and Ethan had come to the door again. Everyone knew it was Ethan. Jina didn't get up to open the door, but her dad did. She tried to stop him, but he had already opened the door. Why have you come again? What cruelty is left now? For God's sake, have mercy on us and our daughter. There was a plea in Jina Hayes' voice. Ethan became even more ashamed. Dad, I haven't come to commit cruelty. I've come to ask for forgiveness. I know what I did is unforgivable, but I want my Jina, my son, back. I want to give her everything she deserves. Jina Hayes stepped aside. He came inside and fell at Gina's mother's feet, begging for forgiveness. Nancy Hayes, surprised, lifted him up, then turned to Jina. Jina, look at his face. He has changed. We can never forget what happened to you, but do you want to let him die with this regret? He is asking for forgiveness, and even God forgives upon repentance. You forgive him too. He is your husband, and above all, the father of your child. Don't separate a child from his father. Yes, Jina. There is true remorse on his face. Forgive him. Jina Hayes also supported Ethan. Jina finally stood up from her place and looked at Ethan. Have you really changed? There was disbelief dissolved in her voice. I have changed, Jina. I truly regret it. I committed great cruelty against you. But now let me spend the last part of my life in your service, at your feet. I want to give my son his right, his name. What do you think, Ethan? Will I give my son your name, because of whom I had to endure all this? Gina's hatred began to melt. Her words were bitter, but the tone had changed. I know, Jina, being my child was no gift for him. But now everything has changed. All my wealth, my entire life is yours. Just accept love from me once instead of pain, Ethan said with intensity. Jina looked at her son, who was smiling, seeing his mother and father at the door. Her motherly instinct won, and her heart melted. The clouds of hatred dispersed. Okay, I forgive you. Not because you asked for forgiveness, but because my child needs his father, And I realized that God also accepts repentance. She spoke with moist eyes. Tears of joy came to Ethan's eyes. He immediately dropped to his knees and held Jina's hand. Thank you. You saved my life. I will give you every happiness in the world. My queen, you have given me a new life today. He was happy. Very happy. Picking up his son in his arms, he was kissing him endlessly, continuously. A few weeks later, Ethan Miller organized a grand welcome back party at his magnificent mansion in New York. This party was the announcement of the new life of Ethan Miller and his wife Jina Miller. The hall was sparkling with lights, and Ethan Miller was holding Jina's hand. Today, I want to make an announcement in front of all my friends and loved ones. This woman, Jina, is not just my wife, but the person who saved my soul. By losing her, I learned everything I shouldn't have learned by becoming rich. He looked at Jina, who was looking at him with a loving smile. Jina, you are my light, my universe. The mistakes I made, I will spend my whole life making up for them. I promise you, now this story won't be of hatred, but of extremely true and pure love. He raised Jina's hand in front of the crowd and showed everyone. And my son Jason Miller is my heir and the biggest reason for my life. Everyone applauded. Ethan paused and whispered in Jina's ear, I love you very much, Jina. And I love you too, Ethan Miller. Jina smiled from her heart. She had received the reward for her patience. They both looked at each other and smiled. In the outside world, Ethan Miller's power was now shining in the light of love. Responsibility and care, and Jina, through her forgiveness, had turned her prison into a palace of happiness.